Hi friends, today we are starting a reading vlog in which I read underrated books on my TBR. So all of these books I'll be reading have less than 500 reviews on Goodreads. Now a couple of things prompted me to do this actually. The first is that a lovely subscriber left a comment on a video and said that I often read books that they've not heard other people talk about, which I thought was lovely. And also I was thinking about that, and it got me thinking about a challenge that a bookstagrammer called Reggie hosted when I first started Bookstagram, and that was all about reading books with less than 50 reviews. And some of these books do have less than 50, but not all of them. And so I put my cutoff at 500. But do check out Reggie's challenge. I think that he still hosts it. And yeah, I'll leave his Bookstagram and the challenge details below. But there's a few books on my radar for this, and crucially they're all published before 2020, so no new releases, which I think is good because sometimes books just don't have the reviews because they've not been out long enough. So what books will I be reading? Well, here's some books that are on my radar that I'm hoping to get to. The first book I'm going to be reading is called The Art of White Roses, and the author is called Viviana Prado Nunez, I think, but I could be butchering that. I'm very sorry if I have. But this is a YA novel. It's set in 1950s Cuba, and this came on my radar because it was longlisted for the 2020 International Dublin Literary Award, and my mum actually bought it and read it and then passed it on to me. I think it's going to be hard hitting, and I think it's going to be interesting, and I'm thinking that I'll probably learn quite a lot about Cuba through not just through reading but also through kind of researching as I read sort of thing, which is going to be good, I think. I then have Stranger Tales of the City, and this is edited by Elizabeth Evershed. I bought this after reading a short story in STEM, which is an anthology of writing by autistic writers, and I read a piece by a writer called Robert Shepherd, and they're an Edinburgh-based writer, and they wrote about university and mental illness and cell keys, and it was this really beautiful piece, and it really moved me, and I posted about how much I had enjoyed it, and the author reached out and said, actually I have another piece published in this sci-fi anthology, and so I decided to buy that. So I'm very curious to read particularly Shepherd's piece, but I'm also interested to see if I might discover some other writers through it. The third book I have is The Diary of a Teenage Girl in Iraq, and it's by a blogger, I believe, called IraqiGirl, and they're anonymous, and they've published this sort of collection of their diary entries, and I think it's going to be really good. I really like diary entry formats in books, and I'm really curious to read about the US invasion of Iraq from somebody who lived in Iraq's perspective sort of thing, and yeah, I think this is going to be very interesting. It's aimed at a younger audience as well. I think it's aimed at like a teenage audience, and so that'll be really interesting to see how the kind of pitch and tone of it comes across in the writing, but I'm very much looking forward to that one. And then finally I have this 99p Kindle deal book on here, and it's Almost Adults by Ali Pantony, and I bought this, as I say, 99p. I think it's like coming of age, being an adult, learning how to adult sort of thing. I'm not really sure what I'm going to think of this one. This is probably the one that I have the lowest expectations for, but it's meant to be like a contemporary, uplit, light read kind of book, and so let's see. So now it's just time to go and get reading. Okay, so I'm just on my lunch break from work, and taking a little break to do a little bit of reading, maybe 10 or 20 minutes or so. I'm going to start with The Art of White Roses. This is about 180 pages long, so it's quite short, and it's also the only physical book on this TBR, so I think the mix of that will be really good one to start with, and I'm curious about it. It's been sat on my physical TBR for over a year now, and it's time to read it. Never mind this vlog, it is just time to read this one, and I'm curious about it. So I'm going to do some reading, and then I'll check in with you when I have some thoughts. I'm only one chapter in, but a couple of things worth noting. This is a book that was originally self-published, and then it won the Burt Award for Caribbean Young Adult Literature in 2017, and then was picked up by a British publisher in 2018, and it's the 2018 copy that I have. I just read the author's note, which is at the back of the book, and probably, in my opinion, should be at the front of the book because it's really, really nice. And it basically says that the character in the book is based off of the author's grandmother, who fled Havana in 1959 and died of Alzheimer's at 60 before the author had the chance to know her properly. And this story of this character is basically the author's imaginings of what Cuba was like in the 1950s and what it was like to be her grandmother and what it was like to grow up in that time and period in history. And I think that's wonderful. It's obviously going to be quite personal then, because it's obviously based on kind of knowledge that's maybe passed down through generations, through storytelling. And yeah, I think that's going to be really, really nice to see how that plays out in the story. Yeah, I have decent hopes. I know my mum read this one and she's the one who passed it on to me and said it was good but had like quite heavy themes but wasn't as hard hitting as my mum had expected it to be. So I'm interested to see what I think, having known that. Okay, so I wanted to come back and update you because I'm now 50% of the way into The Art of White Roses, and kind of thinking a lot about why this might be underrated. It's a small independent press. I looked on Twitter, they've got about 500 followers or something, so it could be that it's had a lack of exposure. The cover is, I don't know, it doesn't really appeal to me personally. I'm not sure if it would appeal to other people watching. It's quite badly photoshopped in my opinion. Like this wee shoe, there's a sort of strange shadow on one of the sides, which I've only just noticed. My partner pointed out, he says, oh, look at that shadow, it's quite creepy. But yeah, I think that could be part of it. Books have covers for reasons and people maybe don't want to judge a book by its cover, but it's inevitable that we will. So my thoughts on reading this so far are that the first few chapters are quite hard to kind of get into, and I felt like I was being introduced to a lot of different characters. It also feels like quite jumpy in the beginning, and I read a little snippet of the acknowledgements just to see maybe if I could get some kind of grip on why that might be. And the author writes that it started as a series of vignettes, which makes sense because they are quite disjointed to begin with. At the moment, it doesn't feel very plot or character driven, but I'm hoping that that might change as the book goes on. It seems like it's going to be plot driven, which is the opposite of what I thought it would be, which I think is why I'm kind of like struggling to get a balance and a grip on the book. It's good to read a narrative from Cuba. I've never read a book, I don't think, that's set in Cuba, so that is very interesting. I've also been doing a bit of research into kind of Cuban history to try and understand where this book sits in history, and that's been quite interesting as well. The book is quite ambitious, like it's kind of attempting to cover a lot of different things, and I think that because it's a debut, maybe the author has got a little bit wanting to put lots of different things in the one book, and I do think that this is probably going to be an author that I will pick something else up from in the future, because it's like the book does show a lot of promise. I don't know if that sounds really patronising, but there's a lot of things about it which I like, but I'm not sure that this exact book, like I think it could have done with a bit more work in terms of kind of honing whether or not it would be plot or character driven, and then like really nailing into that. But yeah, as I said, I wanted to check in because I'm halfway through the book, and I will continue reading now and hopefully maybe finish it even tonight. I'm not sure. It's got a bit more into it, which has been good because I was struggling with that for the first few chapters. But yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm thinking it might be a 3 stars. Let's see how we do. Hello, so a lot has happened since I last spoke to you. I have done a lot of reading and I will check in with you about that in just a second. First of all, we have had a lot of snow here, and so I thought I would play you some of the clips from our walk today in the snow, which was just lovely and scenic and kind of winter wonderland-esque. And yesterday as well I did some baking, and I baked some cinnamon rolls and I made a little sort of video of that. So I'll play that for you now and then I'll check in on the books after that. So it's actually quite a straightforward recipe. I will leave it down below if you want to give it a go yourself. The recipe I use is in Swedish, but I just translate it into English to use it, but it's a very straightforward recipe. You just have your dough and you've left that to proof for half an hour, and then you preferably use a rolling pin, but if you are like us and don't have one, a wine bottle will do. And you kind of shape it into this long shape and add on your cinnamon paste on top, kind of even layers. I probably added a little bit less than I usually would here because it's quite nice to have quite a cinnamony taste, I think. And then you just roll it up into your roll shape. I think at this point I realised that my doughy mixture wasn't the best. It's a little bit too soft. I'm not sure what went wrong this time, but something did. So leave it to proof for a little bit, and then you just add in your egg yolk and kind of give it a little covering to give it that golden texture, which is really nice when it comes out. You also want to add, after this, some powdered sugar or icing sugar to the top. We have in the past also added granola, just because there's a bakery that we really like here that does that to their cinnamon buns, and we were trying to kind of recreate them as best we could, and that's also very nice. They're quite quick in the oven as well. I think they only take about 15 minutes until they're ready to eat, and then you have this delicious, lovely reading snack to enjoy, and yeah, hey presto. Okay, so in terms of the books that I have been reading for this vlog, I finished up The Art of White Roses, and I don't have a lot more to say about that book than I've already said. I think it was quite ambitious and perhaps a little bit over ambitious for a debut and a novel of that size, but I still thought it had some merit, and I liked the setting, the Cuban setting and the historical kind of time frame and all that, so that was very interesting and I liked that. And I did in the end decide to give it 3 stars, so that was kind of in line with what I thought in the first half. But I will say that the second half is a lot more graphic, a lot more intense, and quite a lot of heavy themes, so all the kind of content warnings for that are on Storygraph. I put them on there, so do check that out if you would like to. I then started reading IraqiGirl, the diary entries from the young girl who had been living in Iraq during the US invasion of Iraq, and that is a very difficult collection to read, a very harrowing account of this one young girl's life during that time. 2 things that I will say about IraqiGirl. The first is that I think it hits home all the more sad and all the more kind of intensely in terms of emotions, because it's written obviously from a child's perspective, but the writing style is so childlike that it just kind of nails that home even harder, which makes it even more sad. So it's very like, this happened and then this happened and my friend said this and I feel this, and it's very simplistic, but I think that kind of, it made me feel like, yeah, this is the way I would write when I was kind of 10, 11, 12 years old, and how sad that somebody at that age is dealing with these atrocious things happening on their doorstep and to their family and to the people in their community. It's so sad. I will say that the people who edited the book or brought the book to the world in whatever way, the kind of pieces which aren't written by the blogger IraqiGirl, those pieces, I don't think they add much to the collection. Like, I kind of wish they had brought them to the world in a more kind of bare way, and I say that because there's a foreword that's written by an American man, and it feels kind of unnecessary. Like, I guess growing up in the UK, I have heard the British perspective and I've heard the American perspective, and I wanted to learn the Iraqi perspective, and so yeah, I felt like that was unnecessary for him to be giving a foreword on the collection. It kind of felt a bit like, or feels a bit like, the editors are kind of speaking over the diary entries rather than enhancing them, but that could just be my impression and it could change as the book goes on, so let's wait and see, and I'll kind of reserve judgment on that for now. My thought on why it might be underrated, I don't really understand, apart from that it maybe hasn't been marketed that well, because the publisher is quite a big one. They're called Haymarket Books and they're quite big in America. They have a huge social media following and quite a big profile, so I don't really know why this book would be underrated from that perspective. It could be just that they haven't invested in the marketing. It could also be the framing of the book and the way it's been presented might put people off, because it is on Amazon like rated for 12-year-olds or something, which is quite a young audience for the kind of tone of this book. So I'm not entirely sure, but it could be a combination of those different things. Anyway, there's a part where the young girl is describing Ramadan, and she's talking about, you know, them not having any rest even during Ramadan from these awful things happening, and I found that really, really sad to think about, really harrowing. And I took a little break at that point because it was getting a bit overwhelming, to be honest, the amount of suffering that was happening around her. And so I took a little mini break from the book, and I will be going back to it. But I decided to pick up the fantasy short story collection, Stranger Tales of the City it's called. And this is the one that I picked up because I had liked a piece by a writer called Robert Shepherd, which was in STEM, a collection of writing from autistic writers, and I knew that writer had a piece in this collection. So I picked up mostly for their piece, and was keen to read that. I'm glad I did, because it's quite interesting to see other pieces that they've written. Although some of the elements of the story went a little bit over my head, because it is quite kind of, I think, high fantasy is what you'd say. I still liked reading this writer's piece, Robert Shepherd's piece, because I found that it played on some of the same kind of themes as their story in STEM did, which is like trauma and mental illness and kind of understanding yourself, understanding the world around you, all of those kind of things, and I really liked that. I did decide after reading their piece to kind of not continue with the rest of the collection, because what I had read of the other writers wasn't really gripping me, and so I kind of just decided that that would be enough for me, which is fine, because that's why I bought the collection, was just to read really Robert Shepherd's piece, so I'm glad I did that. I actually this morning as well started the Almost Adults book, which is like a contemporary, and it seems to be quite a fast read. Like I've read I think 3 chapters and I'm already apparently 15% of the way in, which is quite fast. It follows a group of 4 friends all kind of figuring out the world around them. The first chapter starts with a relationship breakup, and it's quite well written, their relationship breakup. It feels very believable, and so I was quite immediately sucked into it, which I think was good, and I'm curious to see where the rest of the stories will go. I'll be curious, because it feels quite quick and fast paced. I'll be interested to see how the author develops each of the narratives and each of the storylines. Again, I'm not really sure why Almost Adults is underrated. I think that it's been published by Penguin, so I guess they just didn't invest in it all that much. The author apparently writes columns and things, so maybe they expected the author's profile to kind of be the book's success, I guess. But yeah, we all know that's not always the case, that people do need marketing behind books. So yeah, I'm going to go back to reading some more and following through with this and seeing how we get on with it all. I have high hopes for these next 2 books, so I will check in with you once I have read some more of them. Hello, so I am now about 45% of the way into Almost Adults, and I feel kind of meh about it. It's centred on a female group of friendships, all heterosexual females who are kind of living their lives and trying to find their place in the adult world, different jobs, relationships, things like that. And it's like quite good, but it's nothing like original or kind of, I guess, interesting or unique or anything like that. It's just kind of, so far at least, run-of-the-mill kind of contemporary fiction that focuses on female friendship and female relationships. And yeah, it's okay, it's fast-paced, so you're like, I'm reading it quite quickly. Like I don't read very much during the week, and I'm like getting through this a lot quicker than I would other books that I have read more recently. I haven't read any more yet of IraqiGirl, and I think I might switch between those 2 just to kind of vary my reading this week and hopefully get them finished. One thing that I kind of was planning to share and didn't end up getting around to filming a little update was that the weather here has been so changeable. So I shared with you the snow that we had and the snowy walk we went on, and then last night we went on this really beautiful like sunshine, like nice summer feeling evening walk, which was lovely. And I'll input some clips from that just now, and you can see just how lovely it was. It was really nice and peaceful. We went to this lighthouse that we really like, Grotta Lighthouse, and just enjoyed the summer feeling evening. And then today I woke up and it's been snowing all day, which has been a different kind of beautiful, but just like two different seasons. Like you thought maybe it was becoming more summer-like, and then suddenly the snow's back again. So I guess this is just what spring in Iceland's like. This is only our second spring here. So I guess this is just the kind of unpredictability of it. But yeah, I'm going to get back to my reading and hoping to read both of those books and have a kind of final update for you soon. I wanted to update you because I finished Almost Adults and actually surprisingly enjoyed it. About 30% of the way in, or maybe even up to 50% of the way in, I was kind of feeling like, meh, it's nothing particularly exciting. But then I found that I was getting quite emotionally invested in the characters, and I found myself like laughing aloud at points. Even one point in the book I actually cried, which, you know, is quite unusual for me. So to elicit such strong emotions, I thought actually this must be quite good to be getting that out of me. And I did really like Ali Pantony's writing style. I thought it was really, really nice. And I was quite impressed. I would read something else from this author. I felt like certain characters were given more weight than others and more kind of storyline. But yeah, I thought it was good. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. It's probably like a 3-star read for me. I was thinking a little bit about why Almost Adults might be underrated, and I think honestly it's probably that the publisher didn't put a lot behind it, because this is the kind of book that I could imagine selling a lot of copies and like being in Tesco's and like, you know, seeing this book kind of everywhere as like the contemporary fiction of the year kind of title that everyone's reading. I could imagine that happening, and so I guess that the publisher just didn't put enough behind it to make that happen, which is interesting because in the acknowledgements the author does say that they were invited by an editor to write this book because they write, I think, for magazines, and they were invited. Somebody saw their writing and thought that this person could write a book and it would be a good seller, and so the editor picked it up, I guess, and sort of picked them up and suggested they write something, which is quite interesting. I've not heard of that before in acknowledgements, so that's quite unusual, I guess, quite interesting, and an interesting story behind a book. But yeah, I would say if you are looking for a contemporary fiction title and you like kind of ones that are about characters who are kind of finding their way in life and kind of going through transitions and big life events, and also on the peak and on the cusp of like becoming adults, like the title was Almost Adults, that's the kind of theme of it, like everyone's trying to find their feet as an adult, I guess. If you like the sound of that, then give this one a go and see if you like it. It's a very readable writing style. It's very like conversational almost. It reads kind of like a magazine in the way that it's written, and it's just very consumable, I guess. So it's very likely that a lot of people will like this book. I could imagine, I used to read a lot of contemporary fiction when I was about 19, 20, 21, and I could imagine having really enjoyed it at that age. And yeah, I did still really enjoy it, so it was good, but I could imagine getting a lot more of it at that age and kind of like really feeling the themes quite deeply and stuff like that. So yeah, so I'm off to go read more of IraqiGirl, and I'll check in with you later on. Okay, I'm just going to be totally honest. It has been 3 weeks, maybe coming on 4, since I read anything for this vlog, and I'm putting off reading this non-fiction book because I know it's going to be heavy themes. I've read some of it already, but I know it's going to be a difficult read, and so I'm putting it off. I'm avoiding it, but I am going to sit down with myself tonight and read it on my Kindle, and I'm holding myself accountable by filming this clip. So yeah, let's hope that works out for me, because I would love to share this vlog with you before I share my wrap up for April, but we're already in the second week in May, so yeah, I'm sorry about that. Not that you know that this is even happening, but I just feel when you start a project like this, I want to see it through, and yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But let's hope I get some reading done tonight. That's my plan, and hopefully I'll have a wrap up to share with you next. I've now been filming this vlog for so long that it's actually possible to sit outside, but for now we are going to get into this, and you can see some beautiful rainbow reflections around me. There is great sadness in this book and a lot of devastation, and so it was nice to see a little bit of joy. Look at this little cutie. This is her nephew, who's just been born. Ah, what a love. Okay, so I have finally finished IraqiGirl, which is really good. I'm really, really glad that I read that book. I think it was really harrowing in places, really difficult read, but such an important book. I'm so glad that IraqiGirl's voice has been kind of shared, and that the blog posts have been shared in a different kind of format, because I wouldn't necessarily have found her blog if not for reading that book and kind of being intrigued by that title and the kind of premise of that book. But I have since, so I think the book finishes in 2009, and so since finishing the book, I think last night, I looked on and just kind of looked to see if the blog was still being updated, and it is, at least until 2018, so it's about 3 years, and it's quite, like, I don't really necessarily want to tell you where we're at when we finish the book, because I don't know how people feel about spoilers for non-fiction. If you can spoil non-fiction, I'm not sure. But it was good to kind of see how IraqiGirl is now, and like where her life is at now, and that kind of helped me, I guess, with the emotions of the book, because it is a very emotional book. There are a lot of content warnings. I tried to put as many of them as I could on Storygraph, but basically there's content warnings for a lot of things. And it's also just so difficult to think about the kind of everyday teenage experiences of this young woman, and then contrasted against this everyday violence that's going on around her. It is harrowing. It's really difficult to read and to think about, but I'm really glad that I did do that and that I heard that perspective. I mentioned in an earlier clip that I felt like the editorial work wasn't the best, and I think it gets better as the book goes on. There's less of the kind of explanations of things, like there was an explanation in the beginning, like what is Ramadan, and I thought, like, how do people not know what Ramadan is? And so that kind of frustrated me, but I felt like it was more just about IraqiGirl and her blogs for the majority of the book. There are like snippets of conversation between what's called like a human shield and IraqiGirl. There are like email exchanges inputted as well, and some comments from people commenting on the blog, and then responses. So that was really interesting as well. I definitely think it's worth reading if that's a topic area you're interested in, and I would say for all of the books in this vlog that if you think any of them sound interesting, like, I would say they're worth reading. Like there's none that I would say, oh, don't read that was rubbish. I think you might get an idea of my kind of thoughts on them, and I think maybe IraqiGirl was a 4-star, but the rest would be about 3 stars. Robert's piece in the Stranger Tales of the City collection, I probably give 4 stars to, but the collection, I didn't read the whole thing, so I didn't give a star rating for that. But yeah, as I say, if any of those books or the concepts of those books sound interesting, then I'm not here to put anyone off reading them. I think they were really, they kind of, I guess, were what they said they were going to be, so they met my expectations in that sense, and that was a good thing. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching this vlog, and maybe you found some books that you maybe wouldn't have heard of elsewhere. Let me know if these sound intriguing to you, or if you were to pick up one of these, which one would be your kind of book, what one you would pick up. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in my next video.